NuVoodoo Live.
Well, it had been rumored for a few months, and Nielsen made it official, or at least the prospect of it official.
Right.
They're moving the average quarter-hour rating measurement stick from 5 minutes to 3 minutes. You know, I'm not sure people even know about this. I know this was a Nielsen 101 when I took a course at Emerson College years ago. Arbitron 101, sorry.
No, you're absolutely right. It was baked in that you had to listen at least 5 minutes in a clock quarter hour.
Yep. And that would be then extrapolated to that unit of listening, which is then extrapolated to the individual listener, and the number of quarter hours are added up and then applied to all the other respondents, and that's extrapolated. So 3 minutes is a big deal.
Yeah, but it had to be 5 minutes. Didn't have to be 5 continuous minutes. Had to be 5 minutes within the clock quarter hour, because once upon a time, radio played programs that were 15 minutes long. So was where we came from.
So now the new rule reduces that threshold to 3, and that was done primarily to try to get, I guess, better representation for tune-in occasions, and one might argue better average quarter-hour ratings for radio.
Oh, look, I mean, let's be honest. First of all, 5 minutes is longer than almost any song that gets played on the radio. 3 minutes is a lot more realistic. If you just came in, it's like, oh, cool. 3 minutes is a lot more realistic. Second of all, stations buy the Nielsen ratings to help them sell radio airtime.
That's right.
So it's got to make radio look good. So in 2024, looking at 2025, makes complete sense to me that anything that will make radio look better is certainly in Nielsen's best interest.
Well, let's think about this. First of all, 50% of Nielsen respondents don't meet that threshold in a tune-in occasion, right? That's under 5 minutes. But when you think about it, YouTube charges an advertiser if 30 seconds go by or the entire length of the spot, whichever is shorter. Now, you could argue that at least YouTube is charging for the advertising exposure, whereas, the indirect measurement of commercial exposure is a quarter hour or 3 minutes of a quarter hour of measurements. It's slightly different.
Right. But nevertheless, I think their change of the threshold is justifiable, and I think it will be it'll be a boost for radio, if nothing else. The thing that we don't know is exactly which formats are going to end up getting the biggest kiss out of this. Right now, it seems though it might be
younger
in youth-oriented formats. You've noted CHR, an alternative here, that'll see the greatest benefit. Yeah. But hey, there'll always be confounds. There will be stations that unexpectedly get a nice lift, and there'll be some of them that may not. That's just going to be the way it is.
Well, and that is a great segue. This, by the way, is going to go into effect. If it does, I think there's one more approval stage left in Q1. What's interestingly is they're going to, apparently, this is what I've read, that they're going to retrofit past surveys because, there's a rolling, Nielsen does rolling monthlies. And so this will have a dramatic impact starting next year if it goes through. But we were planning on doing this anyway, so this was kind of a neat catalyst. When we consider a bar lowered from 5 to 3, that might not seem that big a deal, but that's 40% lower to achieve the same level of credit. And so to me, playing defense is the most important thing to do here. Is doing whatever you can to minimize the things that will cause tune out, which is what we were planning to do. And it was part of a research study that we just completed a quarter ago.
Right. We're talking about one of our ratings prospect studies. This one, our 24th time doing this. This one in particular, a little under 3,200 respondents. We went up to age 64 to get some baby boomers in there. We're hearing more about stations that are monetizing some of that 55 to 64. 50-50 male-female, generationally splayed across those Gen Zs over age 13, millennials, Gen X, and baby boomers, kind of the late boomers, the ones under 65 years of age, nationwide, and conducted their tippy end of May, the very first day of June of this year. So relatively fresh data. And I don't think anything within these particular data, Mike, are likely to have changed in the past couple of months.
No, it's only been a couple of months. And we do these studies a couple of times a year. So we'll be updating this. And I think this will be kind of a main theme because this was a major change for radio.
Right.
All right. So talk to me a little bit about the methodology here and the question we used.
Well, so there, we're down to the people who listen to radio, and we're asking them, when listening to radio, how often have these things caused you to tune out or change stations? And we give them a 6-pointed scale. At the one end is it never causes me to tune out or change stations. At the 6th end, often causes me to tune out or change stations. And we've aggregated the 5s and the 6s here because, okay, so you're not willing to say 6, but 5 is, your dog.
My dog is voting always. And she may bark a little bit. We'll just talk right through it.
Yeah, there you go. 5 plus 6, I think, has gotten everybody in the bucket who we're really concerned about go away when these sorts of things happen. So that's kind of the setup.
Yep, and those quotation marks are in my haste to get this deck ready because I thought this information needed to get out there fast. So that was not Lee. All right, so we're going to do the top 10 catalysts. But let's start with what I would say are the things that tie or do better than commercials. So we always think of commercials as the top reason why people would tune out. But here it was only the 8th of 10.
Yeah.
These all tie or are lower than that threshold.
Right. I mean, commercial breaks, it turns out, there's certainly not a benefit, but I think particularly radio listeners, and you notice that, that it doesn't get out of hand among, and let me explain those 3 column headings. The total sample among radio listeners here. RPS, yes. Our ratings prospects, it's a set of questions that we've been using now for over 10 years that get at the people who are likely to end up in paneling with Nielsen, either in the PPM methodology or diary methodology. And then the subset of that group who not only would likely play the Nielsen game, if you will, but also listen to broadcast radio at least an hour a day. And this time around, the RPS heavies are a thin sliver. It's 5% of the sample, but we say things like they're worth their weight in gold, but they're the people who can really move the ratings for you, move the meter.
I'd argue I used to think of RPS yeses as sort of the foundational measurement for making marketing decisions. I can't speak for programming. But honestly, RPS heavies now, because I've just seen, we've done so many different discrete neighborhood analysis for clients doing, something a little bit more beyond hot zip analysis.
Right.
And we see that, individuals' contribution, the individual participants' contribution in the hundreds of quarter hours range is something that's really waned in the last few years, since even before COVID. And so RPS heavies is the gold standard now for me.
If you got them, keep them. And so when it comes to repeating songs at the same time from one day to another, that horizontal repetition problem, now among the RPS heavies, we're tickling up toward half of them saying, yep, that causes me to go away. Burned out songs, 53%. If you're using call out that doesn't show you a burn number, that's a problem. If you aren't looking at that in your gold testing, that's a problem because it changes around.
What's also interesting is the burnout seems to be registering higher on the tune-out Richter scale than at least the abstract concept of new and unfamiliar music.
Sure.
Which was lower than commercials in terms of being a negative.
Right.
Of course, you could argue that a bad unfamiliar song is just as damaging.
Right. And the problem with the unfamiliar song is we don't know where that fits yet. But frankly, neither does the listener. And sometimes you're going to get lucky. And it's like, oh, I love that song. But the first time you play it, you just don't know.
And at least you can test songs that have gotten exposure for burn.
Right.
Okay, let's deal with 4 through 2 before we get to the good stuff. This is the stuff that at least stayed under 50% with the total sample anyway.
Right. And hosts or DJs being insulting or hurtful. That's almost up to 3 and 5 among the heavy listeners among the ratings likely group. Songs repeated multiple times in a few hours. Mike, we were talking about that before. As they lower the threshold of listening, that could be a bigger concern now. How many minutes is it between that last time you played that song? Or listen, we're in this digital age where increasingly the media that we're shown, I brought up YouTube before, as YouTube's really good at showing me things that interest me. We're all becoming less tolerant of things that aren't targeted at us. Never mind. So talk about things that don't interest me. You can see among the RPS heavies, that's 56%, 55% among the ratings likely segment of this sample.
And I think before we move on, the talk about stuff that doesn't interest me, it goes beyond just content that's poorly chosen. It goes how you stage content. For example, you mentioned YouTube. I watch a lot of video podcasts, and very clearly the YouTube algorithm, which is quite unforgiving. And these are the people who get paid $2 CPM for, every 1,000 views, they make $2. And so it's really important for them to hold people through those different YouTube interruptions. And one of the things they do, the ones that are successful anyway, is there's no big ceremonial setting the stage. They get right to the friggin' content.
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, TV's been doing that, even network TV increasingly. We have intros that are just, the one that comes to mind isn't really network TV, so to speak, but on HBO is Barry. That's it.
Yep.
That was the whole title sequence there. You got it.
Hey, it's one of the reasons I cut the NuVoodoo Live intro down to about 3 seconds compared to the 10 or 12 that we've been running before. All right. Whoops. I went a little too far.
Past number one.
Yeah.
Come on, Mike.
Just right past number one. Okay.
Let's
and
go.
There it is. There's the drum roll post reveal.
Too many bad songs. I mean, ultimately, that's what's going to kill you.
Yep. Yeah, that to the too many overplayed songs. And I think the case for testing your music before this methodology change, well, really, shouldn't be waiting till before, but this would be a good data point to argue for a research budget next year.
Sure.
Okay, so things tend to vary a little bit by different age brackets and certain formats target young and old, and we're expecting Generation Z, and perhaps young millennials, to be more vociferous on some of these tune-out catalysts because they're the ones that's what we're trying to address here.
Right. Fair enough.
All right. So let's go back down through the list here again in chunks. I had to do it a little bit differently here, but let's start with the what we mean by the columns.
Okay. So RPS, they're all ratings likelies. They're all subsets of that segment of the sample who are likely to play the Nielsen game, if you will. And we've got the Gen Zs, in this case, 14 to 27s, millennials, 28 to 43s, Gen X plus, and that's because the sample does run up to age 64. Mm-hmm. So it includes those youngest baby boomers. So we're at 45 to 64. Yep. And then Hispanic, Black, WAO, white, Asian, others, or if it were in Nielsen lingo, it would be just other. Sometimes that gets interpreted as white among looking at Nielsen numbers, but other is really other.
So we maintain the order of the countdown based on total sample.
Right.
But again, I wanted to show the what at least total sample at commercial breaks and better looked like. But now you're starting to see some big variances. And one of the things I'd like to point out, because I know you're doing a lot of Spanish language music and perceptual testing right now, is I'm noticing that the sonic similarity, that's hitting more than half of RPS Hispanic audience.
Yep, it is. And you see it in the results of the music test that we do, that yes, there are certainly stripes of sound that are common through those library tests, but there's enough width there to create a music schedule that wouldn't be labeled as having that same modal, same sound over and over and over again. And you see the success for the stations that do a great job of making. Listen, ultimately, we had all those rules that we used to think about when we were baby DJs, Mike. And ultimately, all those things like no two female vocals back to back. The truth underneath all that was trying to prevent two songs in a row from disappointing the same listener. I may hang with you for one song that I'm sort of so on, but with two in a row, and that's where that same sounding song thing builds up and causes me to go away.
And just to re-amplify a point we made a few slides ago, new song baggage, at least in terms of the notion of a new song, not a problem, even with the oldest audience group, at least the ratings-friendly ones.
Yeah, they're willing to give you a little latitude, far more latitude for new songs they don't know than they'll give you for, I don't know, jokes or sketches that just aren't funny.
Yep.
I would say that the bar has gone up on funny. I mean, in a day and age where I can spend, a half an hour after dinner watching through the monologues on all the late night shows that I like, and some of those are really, really funny. So, doing a quick bit on a morning show that's sort of, that gets judged a lot more harshly than it did in the past.
And there's a lot of syndicated Spanish language radio morning shows out there, and there seems to be a bit of a pushback here again within that cohort.
Right, just not funny. Songs repeated at the same time from one day to another, horizontal repetition problems. You really do win points from having great scrutiny over logs and making sure that's a really winning schedule from day to day to day to day.
Yep. So the action step is make sure your database is constructed in a sonically balanced way, but also so that the inventory can both be separated from 1 hour to another properly, and then most importantly, horizontally from one day to another, especially the weekday regions and the weekend regions. It's all selector or I'm sorry, I've been retired from day-to-day programming. Was it Music Master?
Music Master.
There you go.
Yeah. But the great jocks who do that, are just the best.
Yeah, I heard Selector is no longer just on DOS, to give you an idea of how long it's been.
Or a Unix machine, come to that. So burned out songs, jocks being insulting or hurtful. It was surprising. You brought it up, Mike, that Gen Z is not as snowflakey as we might think they might be.
I was surprised by that.
But on the other hand, these aren't the cool kids.
Yep.
They're the ones who listen to radio and are likely to empanel with Nielsen, so maybe they're cut a little bit differently. They're harder to offend than their reputation would have you believe in 2024.
I think some of our hurtful politics is being reflected in some of these numbers here, specifically for certain segments.
I imagine that's true. Songs repeated multiple times, few hours. You can see, although frankly, all those numbers are sort of a similar stripe.
Yep. So I think we're going to go slower here because I think number 1 and number 2, which we'll show you next, are things that we should absolutely try to do something about.
Right. Talk about things that don't interest me.
Yep. Because half or more of the ratings-friendly audience, regardless of age, and in particularly this young group that is expected to have their listening measurement increase by nearly 30%.
Right.
So that's a big deal.
So you may not be able to change the content itself, but you can at least change the sensibility of why is it interesting?
Yeah.
How do they connect to it? Why does it matter to them? Oftentimes it's just a matter of how you set it up or how you follow through with why it did matter to them. To make those pieces connect for people. And then number one,
I was going to just mention that we have some interesting tools that can help us get at content that's more relevant. For example, the focus group product that you've been doing for radio in the last few years.
Yeah, I mean the content piece that we do is killer for that because we can take actual audio clips from a morning show or a high-profile afternoon show or whatever it is, and have people look at it or measure it moment to moment with a slider on their smartphone, and tell us are they finding that incredibly entertaining, or are they likely to tune out? It's our GPS product, and it really does help.
And nobody's expected to show up in a conference room and sit behind a mirror while executives eat dinner and laugh at the ones that push back.
Right.
All right, number 1.
It's still too many bad songs.
Play the hits, man.
Yeah, and these are numbers across these, except for Gen Z. It's almost 60%, or in some cases better, 3 and 5. Too many bad songs, and that's something that we can do something about with music testing. We're
not going to be able to undo whatever damage or benefit the 5 to 3 minute transition makes retroactively. But certainly by Q1 2025, giving your radio station an audit for all of the, and it's not just about DJ, again, personality, talk host talk. It's about all the other things from liners and promos to, hey, even the tonality of commercials that can make a difference.
Yeah, I was going to say, I made the point to a client recently that in most hours, in terms of talk profile on the station, the most talk, the source is the commercials.
Yep.
They can worry about the jocks liners or what's in the promo, but most of the non-music hour is commercials. So we can try to make those better where we can, can't we?
So these are the solutions or the problems we presented, and the order of priority. We think it's important to address them, but we do have some tools and solutions as well.
Yeah, our ASAP study is a tactical perceptual. We do it with a 300 sample and a shorter interview, so we can turn them around pretty quickly. It's when, oh my God, we really do need to know, and for less than $10,000, we can get you answers typically in about 4 weeks from the time you say, yep, that's a questionnaire, let's go. For about the same price tag, we can test up to 400 titles from your library with 100 respondents, carefully scrutinized and screened exactly as you want them, which is a pretty great price, all inclusive. And, talk to us about what you need for, we still call it call out, even though nobody's on a phone, nobody's calling anybody. It's all done online with the panel samples that we torture all the time. I think we are one of the providers we work with points out that we are the only research company they work with who throw out as many respondents as we do, because we don't like the cut of their jib. We don't think they're really where they say they are. We don't think they actually listen to that station. They're gone. And
we do not roll samples. We don't reuse respondent data. Everything is fresh, whether you're doing weekly or biweekly. It's 100% of the sample is recruited in real time.
Right. Yeah. So your whatever sample size we've agreed upon, if it's 80 or 100 or 120, whatever it is per cycle, per week or whatever it is.
Yeah, they're all this week.
Every time.
Yep. Oh, and it costs about the same as those providers that are doing the rolling stuff. All right. So this is actually probably the 5th or 6th video that's covered a lot of different insights about how ratings prospects act differently than the normal everyday human who consumes the radio. And you can get more information about that by going to our website at NuVoodoo.com/webinars to watch those videos. And it's pretty easy to get in touch with you, Lee, to see the entire data presentation or to talk about research.
Absolutely. Be glad to show it to pretty much anybody. But an email to tellmemore@NuVoodoo.com or Lee, Leigh, @NuVoodoo.com. We'll get right back to you and get you on the schedule.
And we'll see you again for another NuVoodoo Research Live. Let me do that outro again. I can edit it. And we'll see you again for another edition of NuVoodoo Live. And we'll see you again for another edition of NuVoodoo.
NuVoodoo builds digital products and conducts research and marketing campaigns for clients.
It's easy to get in touch. Drop us a line at tellmemore@NuVoodoo.com.